flats, we don't just need a map of Manchester, we need a map of the world.
Building is booming here in the northwest. According to one recent survey, construction in Manchester and Salford alone has doubled in the last 2 years. There are more than 14,000 apartments being built. So who is behind the developments and who is benefiting? Well, Stuart Pollock's been investigating.
It isn't hard to tell that Manchester and Salford are experiencing a building bonanza, but how much of this constant construction is good for the people who live and work here? In this investigation, we'll reveal the block owned by buyers around the globe.
What should be homes for Mancunians turn into assets and security boxes for offshore wealth.
The entrepreneur who says it's easier to raise money in China than Cheshire.
I think Chinese investment into Manchester is only a good thing.
And the developer who's decided he'll only sell to local buyers.
We made a decision to ban investors completely, and the motivation behind that was because we believe that you get the city you deserve.
But first, meet wannabe first-time buyer Sam. Born in Failsworth, studied in Manchester, hoping to get on the housing ladder.
There's a lot of uncertainty, I think, coming from a young person's perspective. You know, prices are only going up at the moment, so I think it is a challenge. Developers, they do want to sell to the highest bidder, and that's not often young people, but it is, I think, vitally important for young people to get on the property ladder. On the whole of it, I think it is a difficult place for a young person to buy.
Why is it so hard for them to find somewhere to live?
In the research that we conducted, over 50% of these new developments are for the private rented sector, which still leaves a substantial number of units for sale. The problem is that a lot of these are marketed abroad in places like Hong Kong or Singapore.
So actually, first-time buyers are at the bottom of the food chain?
Yeah, Mancunians are really going to struggle to find opportunities to buy.
This is 1 Smithfield Square, a block of flats in Manchester's northern quarter. It's typical of many sites which have sprung up in the last few years. We've brought the land registry ownership details for all 77 flats in this block. They cost £3 each and tell an interesting tale. To show exactly who owns these flats, we don't just need a map of Manchester, we need a map of the world. 2/3 of the apartments are owned by foreign buyers who rent them out. They're based in countries like Hong Kong, Singapore, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Jersey. The most popular ownership, though, 24 out of the 77 flats, is companies in the British Virgin Islands, a popular tax haven. Another 20 are owned by British property companies or buy-to-let landlords. Just 9 are owned by the people who live in them. Is it a good example of what's happening across the city?
It's a really good example, and isn't it interesting that a building in the northern quarter in Manchester could be connected to the British Virgin Islands?
Most of this building is owned by individuals and small companies, but there are much, much bigger beasts in town.
If we took a walk across the city, we would see these huge urban development sites. We find Singapore billionaires, we find private equity groups, we find German and Australian pension funds, we find even regimes in the Middle East, all seeking to invest and profit out of the city. With all this billions of pounds of investment coming into the city, the council have failed to use it to provide social and affordable housing in the city centre, and that's really problematic for Mancunians.
And I think on the back of this visit that we'll be doing far more business with China.
Council leader Sir Richard Leese has spent more than 2 decades encouraging investment into Manchester from around the world.
The money is international, so working with good partners who are in it for the long haul is clearly a way of helping us build places, build communities rather than just build houses. There are issues with the housing market in Manchester. What is being built is really, really good and we need more of it. But there isn't enough being built for sale to owner-occupiers, and there absolutely isn't enough that's being built for low-income individuals, low-income families.
We've looked at some of obviously the schemes around, and a quarter of them owned in the British Virgin Islands, some in Shanghai, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Does that make you feel uneasy in any way that that's going on?
I think the important thing for blocks is how they are managed.
So you don't really mind who owns them?
Well, clearly, we would like more owner occupation, and if it's being owned by buy-to-let landlords, well, that's not that different to what's happening in a lot of other cities. So the point is, if the choice is having that accommodation for people working in Manchester or not, and that is what the choice is at the moment, I'd rather have the accommodation.
And we can expect more inquiries from foreign buyers, according to this property research company in Hong Kong.
We see that a lot of Chinese investors, they choose Manchester instead of London now. These Chinese buyers are shifting interest into Manchester. And Manchester, as compared to 17 figures versus 18 figures, we find that there are approximately 144% growth in terms of inquiries.
A favourable exchange rate, better rental returns and good universities are all factors.
So it's just up here, the flat.
The Far East has certainly helped Charles Rhodes' business, as a young developer trying to get finance in the UK was a challenge.
They took one look at how long the company had been running and the fact that we didn't really have any track record on paper, and it was straight away a no. And it made it very hard for us to secure funding, and our only option was to go overseas.
So Charles took his ideas and his team off to China.
We've been to Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Shanghai. The response over there was really good. They could see that we had the relevant experience and market knowledge to make the schemes that we were taking on a success.
And your dining table there, probably.
These are some of the 75 apartments Charles has under construction across the region.
We've got another 2 viewings today. So I presume it's probably going to be around for probably the next week, and then it'll be gone.
The city as a whole really benefits from Chinese investment because it's enabled us to take unused spaces like factories and pieces of land and turn them into homes for people to live in.
A home to live in is exactly what this queue of buyers wanted. This was what happened when dozens of flats went on sale at this old mill in Ancoats.
You buy something like this, you think, we've got a beautiful mill, all we need to do is just put some nice furniture in it.
The developer, Tim Heatley, is behind a number of big projects in the region, but this one is unusual.
We're building them not for investors and not for renters, but as a principal home, as a main residence for owner-occupiers.
Tim says his decision means more work and less profit.
Owner-occupiers will need a lot more hand-holding, need a lot more time to be spent with them, and we need to put a lot more money into a project, typically 3 and 4, 5 times as much.
Tim reckons as many as 95% of Manchester's 14,000 new apartments will be sold to investors.
A lot of investors will sell that apartment 2 and 3 and 4 times before it ends up in a completed apartment. So it might have sold initially for 150,000, and then before it's completed it could be 160, 170, 180. So they get flipped on, and that's how they make their profit, and that pushes the prices up. Which goes to about... At the minute, the focus is on investment and not on owner-occupiers, and I think that needs to shift.
Sam's hunt for a home ended here. He can see his apartment taking shape.
So this one here, where this steel structure is, that's my apartment. So that one there is the one I'm going to be living in. It's not in fit state right now, but in hopefully a year's time, 9 months' time, yeah.
What was it like to have finally found somewhere?
It gives you a bit of butterflies, really, thinking that's going to be my place and my first place. So, yeah, exciting times.